was at Iwo Jima in World War II? When guys dived into 19-foot waves, they didn't do it going, how's this going to impact me? How's it going to impact the next generation? That's why they were called the greatest generation. And guys, I never had the honor or the privilege of serving in the military, but I do understand the oath to protect this country from all enemies, foreign and domestic. Guys, I believe with every stitch of my body, we need patriots today on the homeland. We need patriots who are willing to stand up. We need patriots who are willing to be engaged for the long haul. And give whatever you can give, whether it's money, or whether it's time, or whether it's prayer, but for heaven's sake, take a stand. March Madness is happening right now, the basketball stuff. I'm taking my boys to the Final Four in Houston. That's going to be my break. We're going to stay at Chuck Norris's ranch. That'll be kind of fun. So I told the boys we'll get a kick out of it. But let me talk from a coach for just a second, then we'll open up for questions. We have a window of opportunity here, guys. And as a coach, when you have a window of opportunity, you can seize it and you can win the game. But if you don't seize the window of opportunity, I'm telling you right now, you're going to get rolled. You are going to get rolled. So either we're going to seize it or we're going to get rolled. 2008, the freshman legislative class that went to D.C., 14% of them identified themselves as pro-life. 14%. In 2010, we sent in a whole new wave of Congress people to Washington, D.C., freshman class. 81% of them identify themselves as pro-life. But it's a window of opportunity. The exit polling, 2010, they asked people when they left the polling booths, they said, identify yourself, meaning Republican, Independent, or Democrat. Number one answer, none of the above. Number one answer, 41% said, I'm a conservative first. We have a window of opportunity, and I'm telling you right now, the opposition is sincere, and they are strategic to change this country. We need to rise up and be counted and defend this country for faith, for family, and freedom, and for the next generation. That's why we're doing what we're doing. With that, let me open up for any Q&A. When I was a candidate here at the Pizza Ranch, it stood for questions and avoidance. Now we'll try to give you some answers.
The liberals are winning because they are not of the public schools. And I don't know what's your plan to change that? Because our kids are sitting in public schools being indoctrinated in this worldview for 7 hours a day. So they're being bombarded with the 7 hours, and then they go to sports or music or whatever they do after school, and they talk to their parents maybe 30 minutes a day. They've had 7 hours of this worldview indoctrination.
Let me address that on a couple of fronts. I used to be an educator, okay? And still very interested in education. First and foremost, the reason the public schools are where the public schools are today is because the NEA is not about teaching and learning. The NEA is about advancing a very liberal agenda inside our schools, okay? So you got to call it out for what it is.
Right, so how do we change that?
Two is, by us taking a stand to understand that our schools are designed for teaching and learning, not for raising our children. Which means you need to simplify the system, which means it becomes a whole lot less, or a whole lot more affordable to educate the kids, because now you're just focused on math, and on language arts, and on authentic American history, okay? Versus all the other peripheral stuff of trying to raise the kids. Well, if that's the case, we got to draw it back another step here. That means moms and dads needs to be moms and dads. That means grandpa and grandmas need to be grandpa and grandmas. We also need to realize that the #1 influencer in a child's life, bar none, is not a teacher, it's not a coach, it's not a pastor, it's not Michael Jordan, it's not LeBron James, it's not whatever rap star happens to be the rap star of the day. It is a mom or a dad is the #1 influencer. So moms and dads, it's not just okay to drop your kids off at the public school or any other school step door and say, okay, raise the kid. You've got to raise your children as well. Moms and dads need to be moms and dads again.
And it's got to be early, because now all this preschool daycare stuff, because children have their values set by the time they go to school if they're in a proper family.
And I want to bring it back one other part about where I said it's negligent not to be involved in government. Guys, the reason I believe God instituted government is, one, is it reflects the soul of a culture. Okay? Well, if the soul of our culture is going to be anything goes, guess what the schools are going to teach? Anything goes. But if the culture stands up and says, no, we're affirming one man, one woman marriage in the state of Iowa, then we as society say that's what you teach in the schools, you don't teach the other stuff. So I understand what you're saying, but it's a multi-step. But I would always say, let's start by looking in the mirror about moms and dads being moms and dads again.
I got a question. In the school system, they're still teaching evolution, that you came out of a little blob, you know, and I mean, they're not following the Bible in the slightest, yet you're not allowed to go on to the next grade level unless you take their tests and write what they want you to write. And I'm very against that, and there doesn't seem to be a way of stopping that, and that's still continuing. I can remember back in 6th grade not being allowed to go to 7th grade if I did not deny God and put down on the test all the garbage that I was being taught about evolution in school. And it created quite a squabble, and my parents finally said, they're going to keep you back if you don't write what they want you to write. So I wrote what they wanted me to write so I could go on to 7th grade. They are still pushing this garbage, and the parents have no rights, still to this day, to say, whoa, I don't believe I came from an A.
What, from an educator, there's two perspectives here. I'm going to tell you from a parent point of view, and I'm going to tell you from an educator point of view. I addressed this from an educator point of view when I was running for Lieutenant Governor of Jim Nussle in 2006 at Iowa State University. And I said, evolution is a theory. It's not fact. The problem is we're teaching in schools as it's fact. If it's a theory, you need to balance it with the other than theory, which is creation, or intelligent design as some people will call it. I got lambasted by the faculty of Iowa State and other Regent universities, and by Reka Basu again, you know, about, I'm trying to force my, no. It's that if it's a theory, you got to teach it as a theory, not as fact. Okay?
They taught it as a
There's more than
fact.
one theory.
Right. And so, and the only way you keep it as a theory is by introducing another option here. From a parental point of view, if that's where the public schools are at, I think you have options, and I believe that's why the homeschool movement is growing, and I believe that's why the private school movement is growing as well.
Well, they even took the Pledge of Allegiance out of our school. They
That-
don't even want us to have the Constitution anymore.
Yeah, I mean, those some things are local. I mean, I remember when I was a high school principal, and we'd have student assemblies, we'd begin with the Pledge of Allegiance. I used to have the assembly presenters tell me, you're about the only school we go to anymore that still does the Pledge of Allegiance. To me, that's a local decision that you can have. But what I'm saying is there's some teachers that are leaving public school systems, and I know them, who are leaving public school systems and go teach in private school systems so they can finally teach again, instead of being inundated with all this other stuff that's going on. So that's taking place. Well, but I'm telling you guys, the stem line for truth, if we don't talk about it, you know, the silence is deafening, and somebody else is going to fulfill that silence. After the Barnum opinion, I wrote an opinion editorial called When Leaders Don't Lead. Darla thinks it's one of the best opinion editorials I've ever written, because I didn't send it in. And, but when leaders don't lead, and when I talked about, I addressed the courts, I addressed the legislature, I addressed the governor, but then I addressed Bob and Darla and people like Bob and Darla. When we don't lead in our own marriages, this is what you get. When you don't take the responsibility from generation to generation looking for teachable moments, this is what you get. And then I went to the pastors and to the churches about when you don't fuel the flame of a God-honoring design and biblical meaning for marriage, this is what you get. But when leaders don't lead, it's an exponential factor. It'll either be an exponential factor in the right way or in the wrong way. I heard Matt come in, and we obviously are on a tight schedule because we're going to Manchester, and we have other meetings to get there. But let me end it with this, Lizette. Guys, if you ever left a Rocky movie or some other kind of motivational thing, you left you going, now what do I do? Maybe November 2 was that for you, where you cheered and you're like, this is exciting. We finally started to take some ground. But now you leave and you go, now what do I do? This is to take a moment of November 2 and turn it into a movement, a long-term movement with long-term harvest for this country. And we'd love to have you get engaged with the family leader. But I want to thank you for attending. I'll let Matt wrap it up, but thanks so much.
Does anyone not get their stuff filled out on here? Okay. One of the things that we want to chip away at is some of the fallacies or some of the misconceptions surrounding what we're doing. When we were in Cedar Rapids, a bunch of people were wearing buttons. People were kind of protesting us. It said, democracy, not theocracy. And so they're suggesting that by saying what we say and doing what we do, that somehow we promote a theocracy where the government endorses a religion and crams it down everyone's throats. Well, obviously that's not the case. I think both Bob and I and a lot of us in this room would die to defend the freedom of religion that is a cornerstone of what America is all about. At the same time, we'd remind those folks that the separation of church and state is nowhere in our founding documents. It's a complete fabricated lie that's being perpetuated by educators and people around. In fact, if you look at it, the separation of church and state, that phrase comes from a letter, a personal letter that Thomas Jefferson wrote to the Danbury Baptists. And when he wrote it, he meant that the church isn't going to, or the state isn't going to endorse any one church. He didn't mean let's eradicate all of government and civic life from anything that refers to God. It's just absolute nonsense. Democracy, not theocracy. The other thing we remind those folks is that the people who put this country together, Bob alluded to it, in order for us to be a great nation, we got to be good. Morally good, and it hangs on good religion and morality. Those are our founding fathers. Many of them took direct biblical quotes and tried to implement them into the forming of our government. One of the reasons we have 3 branches of government comes straight out of the Bible. And so we want to eradicate any idea that somehow there needs to be a separation between church and state, or that somehow if you say the things we've said today, that you advancing a theocracy that wants to squish everyone who doesn't believe what we do. That's not the case. Finally, I'll say, and then I'm going to close with prayer, really excited about what we're doing because it's bigger than a candidate. It's bigger than an issue. In fact, it's bigger than just social issues. We talk about fiscal issues. In fact, it's bigger than politics altogether. We advance truth with the Truth Project and Marriage Matters. Those things aren't political. Those things are biblical. And furthermore, we're not locked into one election cycle. We're locked into a decades-long, multi-generational vision that's going to turn around. It didn't take us overnight to get where we're at, and it's going to take us more than overnight to go where we got to go. And we'd love you to saddle up and ride with us. Thanks for coming. And will you bow your heads with me and pray?